Young Community School Board meeting to order. Will you please, all rise for the pledge of allegiance?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Denise Hendrickson. I am the School Board Vice President. Our agenda for this meeting is available on the Young Community Schools website. Board members joining via Zoom meeting today are Debbie Edwards, Casey Shaw, Frank King. Do we have any community comments?
We do not.
Okay, all right. At this time, I'm gonna turn it over to.
Well, first of all, thank you for being willing to meet on short notice and at a unique time. I know this was the only time that the five of you were available, so thank you, and obviously three joining us from different locations. We've got a lot of moving pieces this time of year, and budget is a big priority for us, and so today we want to recommend resolution 11-23-24 to the board for approval. But before we move forward with that, I'm going to invite Jennifer Carrower, our CFO, up to present some information on why we're here today and talk a little bit more about this resolution and what it means.
Good afternoon. So, slide up there. Okay, so first I wanted to just go over a little bit of a timeline that from where we've been since we had a double levy failure. So that was in April. We had staff layoffs in May. Our budget was due July 10th. And conversations involving budget cuts have been occurring since our double levy failure. Board meetings internally, and then conversations with OSPI and ESD. I want to talk about that just a little bit, but first, talking about the board meetings that are coming up. So today's board meeting is, as Chris mentioned, to petition to budget receivables. And then we will be having a budget study session next Thursday. And then we will have budget adoption the following Thursday on August 22nd. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the conversations with OSPI and the ESD. We had the CFO of OSPI and the apportionment director and accounting director, and then Jennifer Pretty, assistant superintendent for the ESD. And we went over, the purpose of the call was to talk about binding conditions. We were anticipating that we were going to not have a balanced budget. And so we talked to them about how that process would work. And an example of what might be included in our binding conditions if we were to ask for that. And then they talked also about additional documentation that we're gonna have to submit throughout the year if we go into binding conditions. And we will be having at least quarterly meetings with them to go over and talk about our financial situation. So that is the timeline. The budget adoption was initially going to be scheduled for the 29th. But the 29th, it's due, all category 1 districts have to submit a certified budget by August 31st. That would only give us 2 days. If something were to come up in the 29th meeting, we wouldn't have time to have another meeting if there were questions that were unanswered, et cetera. So it's not good to adopt that late. So we did move it up earlier. And so we can move forward and focus on the upcoming year. So.
I'll just add to that, under normal circumstances, we wouldn't have a problem at all going on the 29th and presenting a budget for adoption. But given all the challenges that we're facing, we feel like that extra week is going to give us an opportunity that if we do need to make additional changes after we present it to you, we still have a week buffer to be able to do that, which is very possible. I also just want to briefly speak on the July 10th date. So the July 10th date is when budgets are due across the state from districts. It is very, very common for districts to not have budgets completed by July 10th. And in fact, Most districts will adopt their budget in August. We have had many conversations around that particular date of why July 10th, can we move it out? But typically districts are always asking for an extension to adopt their budgets in August. So that is not uncommon given levy failure or any other budget issues. Districts typically will adopt that budget in August.
Yeah, even TJ Kelly, the CFO of OSPI, said that's just an unreasonable date for districts to get it done by then. Next slide, to talk about binding conditions, I know that Chris earlier gave you guys a copy of the WAC and some other presentation that TJ did to give you a little background on what binding conditions means. And there's different levels of binding conditions, but for the first couple years, it's more of just additional oversight, not getting too much involved in our daily decisions that we're making. And so if a school district is unable to produce a balanced budget, they must request binding conditions from OSPI. And that is to provide additional oversight and counsel to support the district in returning to a financially healthy position. I took that right off of OSPI's website. And then, so the resolution for today is to petition to OSPI to budget future receivables. So that is the purpose of today's meeting. It's a formality that we have to submit a resolution, an approved board resolution to them in order to request to not submit a balanced budget, basically. So today's meeting is not for the purpose of talking about details of the budget. That's why we're having the budget study session next week. But it's just for the purpose of getting a resolution adopted due to their required timelines. So our projected ending fund balance for 24-25 is approximately 1.2 million in the negative. And so we are petitioning to OSPI to budget future receivables in that amount. And due to double levy failure, ESSER cliff, escalating costs, lower enrollment, and we've talked about all of these things of why we're in the situation we're in right now in the last several meetings. So just to reiterate that. And then I want to talk a little bit about our fund balance. So we have a fund balance policy, as you're well aware, that we have to set aside 5% of our budgeted expenditures. And I want to talk about, we talk about it, but not really the purpose for it. So I wanted to talk about that a little bit today and then talk about the different classifications that are included in our fund balance, because people think that you have an ending fund balance and it's positive. Well, that's great. But there's other things that are restricted within that fund balance that I'm going to go over. So the set aside, the minimum fund balance policy is to ensure that we can continue our essential operations, and if any emergency situations come up, we can handle those. And the fiscal year 24-25 minimum fund balance is about 4.7 million. So that's 5% of our budgeted expenditures. Okay, next slide. So on this slide, so this just goes over the different classifications of fund balance. And so I wanted to talk about them individually. We have a couple that we really don't have much control over. Restricted for other items, and that's small. It's just our impress cash accounts that we need in our buildings to operate. And then we have inventory, prepaid items, carryover, and transfers. I have those all lumped together because, again, those are really not things that we have any control over. The value of our inventory is what it is. Our transfers are for debt service for our non-voted debt. And then prepaid items are those things that we're paying for now that are actually for next school year and coming out of next year's budget. And then carryover, we have certain programs such as CTE and some of our grants that we carry over funds. If we don't spend them all, we carry them over and they have to be spent on those programs. So they're basically called restricted carryover. And then we have our set aside for minimum fund balance, which I just talked about. And then we have an unassigned, so the unassigned fund balance is basically a plugged number based on what your beginning balance is, your revenues, your expenditures, and your ending balance. We've already talked about our ending balance being approximately 1.2 million. So our unassigned fund balance is 7.1 million in the negative. What that means is that an unassigned fund balance would be money to use on any things that aren't set aside as restricted. So we don't have anything that we can use our fund balance on, other than those items, and we're in a deficit. So that's why we are petitioning to budget receivables for 24-25. That was a lot of information. Do you have any questions?
Think what all, go ahead.
Oh, I also wanted to point out, if you remember, we talked about it several times, that we actually budgeted to have our minimum fund balance be 1.2 million in the deficit, because our unassigned fund balance that we budgeted last year was 1.2 million. It's just increasing to 7.1 million for 24-25.
And even though we submit our budget, there are still some unknowns that you know, increases in utilities and some of the insurance costs, some of those things are still estimated. And then also we have bargaining with 3 of our groups right now going on. So that also influences our ending fund balance. So even though we submit a budget on the 22nd, there are still some things that are fluid. What questions or thoughts do you have? Again, like Jennifer said, the idea would be on the 15th, which we're already scheduled all day on Thursday for our building reports, where each school does their building report for the year. That's something that our district has done every year. And then the plan would be after that, that we would have a study session specifically on the budget. So that then the following Thursday, we could recommend the budget for approval.
Well, I put this. Are there things in our budget like the building repair funds that we cannot touch because they are for building and building repair only?
Well, we have, there's different classifications. We have minor repairs and maintenance, things that we do continuously come out of our general fund. But I think you're referring to our building fund, so our bond fund. And yes, we cannot use any of that money for what we have in our general fund to help us offset any deficit in our general fund. That money is restricted for those things, buildings. And other things that bond approves, safety and security, and some other projects.
So if we ask for this 1.2 million to be brought forward, is there a feasible way to pay that back with other cuts next year? Or are we essentially going to keep kicking this can down the road until the next levy, hoping that it passes?
Well, even if the levy does pass, we're still gonna have some cuts to make next year because of the levy not passing. So, because it impacts two separate fiscal years. So to answer your question, kind of yes and no.
Well, and the other question, I think, Casey, is that essentially we're not borrowing the money. We're presenting an unbalanced budget. And that's what the resolution allows us to do, and work with OSPI to, over the next 2 years, develop a plan to create a balanced budget, whether we pass our levy or not. Obviously, with our levy, that helps tremendously for us to get back to a balanced budget, but we can't make any assumptions that we're gonna have that money. And you know, we won't know anything until you as a board decide if we go out in February, and if we do go out in February, at what rate. That obviously has an impact on what our budget looks like moving forward. I do want to add, Jennifer referred to our meeting with OSPI and the ESD. I can't say enough about how helpful they were in our conversation. And TJ Kelly and Michelle Matakis, they were excellent and great to work with. And they really do have an interest in walking alongside us through this. And same with the ESD and Jennifer Pretty there. So this would be a team approach, helping us navigate back to a balanced budget and to a healthy bottom line for our district, which we believe we would get there over the next 2 years while we continue making cuts. This doesn't mean that we stop making cuts today. This would be a continuation, and we're doing that daily. We just had a 3-day retreat at the middle school with our administrators and went over building budget cuts and some other reductions that we've made in the day-to-day operations. So we're going to continue to find ways to make those reductions as we move through the year. So it's not a just sit and wait and see. We're going to be proactive in this, and then those conversations with OSPI is us sharing with them our plan and them also sharing with us some of their thoughts. Anything I missed on that?
No, I don't think so. If we did not continue to meet the binding conditions, which would talk about having to restore our fund balance within the next year to 2 years, then we would have a lot more oversight by OSPI. They would actually start making some of our decisions for us. So to answer your question, Casey, we will pretty much be forced into working towards a balanced budget.
What kind of decisions would they make for us? Because that would be in purchasing or?
Hiring, purchasing, you name it. If we are not making any strides to balance our budget within the first 2 years, not making any improvements to getting financially healthy, then they would have a lot of oversight of our district. I can't say what it looks like because I don't know that there's districts. I think there's maybe one district that has been in that situation. But they do provide a lot of decision making. We lose a lot of that control.
Typically, districts are able to get out of binding conditions within 1 to 2 years. If you go beyond the 2 years, that's what you're referring to, and they have significant oversight. They can also withhold funds and apportionment that districts get if you don't follow the procedures and the steps that they require. So it's in our best interest to do everything we can over the next year, 2 years, to create a balanced budget. And so, much like we recently announced cuts in athletics, we would be continuing to look for ways that we can reduce costs, and then also looking at next spring through attrition. We certainly do not want to have to go through a reduction in force again. We would like to avoid that. But we would have to look for ways to reduce costs so that we can get a balanced budget the next year or two. If there aren't any other questions, then what we would need is a motion, and then for you as a board to take a vote.
Well, I make a motion, we approve resolution 11-23-24, petition to budget receivables.
Do I have a second?
I second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Go ahead.
Frank and Debbie, can you unmute?
Aye. Did you hear me?
Debbie?
Frank says yes.
Frank said yes, okay. All right. All right, then.
So
Resolution passed.
next steps, next week on Thursday, again, we are here all day. All of our buildings will be coming in to do their presentations. It's a long day. Thank you, Jennifer. It's a long day, but I think one of the really positive things that we do when our buildings come forward and our building administrators get to present on their successes and challenges and goals for this upcoming year. I feel very good about the plans that we have in place moving forward. And so that'll be a long day. We'll take a break after those, and then we'll come back and do a study session on budget, and then a plan to again, I apologize for the change in schedule, moving our board meeting back to the 22nd. That'll be a complete board meeting, not only presenting the budget to you, but we're gonna go ahead and bring all the other items that we had scheduled for the 29th. So then we're not bringing you back again on the 29th unless you as a board direct us differently as you see the budget. We need to make adjustments, and then we would obviously have to schedule another meeting there. So we're gonna be spending a lot of time together over the next couple weeks. And then that'll also include some executive session time as well. So it's gonna be a busy August.
Okay. All right, so our next meeting is gonna be August 15th, beginning at 8 AM. Right,
All right. Thank
okay,
you.
meeting is adjourned.